Archaeologists just uncovered what is possibly Jesus' secret words. 2. Peter buried for 1,500 years in ancient Galilee. What did they find? Keep watching. This is incredible. The Israeli Antiquities Authority announced recently that archaeologists uncovered an ancient burial cave in northern Israel containing at least 20 ossuaries. Now, an ossuary is basically a type of stone box used to hold bones after a person has died. The archaeologists believe that this cave was used by a single family over a period of about 300 years, from the 3rd century BC up to the 2nd century AD, nearly 2,000 years ago. But what they found inside these boxes was even more fascinating. One of the ossuaries had an inscription on it which read, "Jesus, son of Joseph." It's likely that this box contained the remains of Jesus' brother, not the Messiah himself. As far as we know, there is no record of any of Jesus' brothers being named Joseph. However, there is a record of one of his brothers being named James. And if you've been following for a while, you know that not too long ago an ossuary was discovered in Israel bearing the name James, son of Joseph. Many scholars believe this was James, the brother of Jesus. But there are a few problems with this theory. First, the inscription reads, "Son of Joseph," and we know from the Bible that Jesus' earthly father was Joseph. Second, there's no way to confirm that the remains inside the ossuary actually belong to James, the brother of Jesus. It could be the bones of a random person with the same name. It's also odd that someone would refer to Jesus as son of Joseph when everyone knows he was the Son of God. So who was this Jesus, son of Joseph? Is it really Jesus, the Messiah? Or is this yet another case of a random coincidence? There are two possible explanations here. Either this was Jesus, son of Joseph, or this was a random person with the same name. Let me go through each scenario. First, let's talk about the possibility that this box contains the remains of Jesus, the Messiah. If this were true, then we can probably assume that this Jesus was buried here shortly after his death around the year 33 AD. The problem is that the Bible says nothing about Jesus having any brothers named Joseph. So why would his brother be buried with an inscription reading, "Jesus, son of Joseph"? It makes no sense. Now, the reason some people are trying to make sense of this could be because there is a passage in the Gospel of Matthew that reads, "And Jesus went around all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Therefore, he said to his disciples, 'The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the master of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field.'" Some people point to this verse and say that Jesus had other brothers that were not named in the Bible. For example, the Coptic Orthodox Church believes that Jesus had 4 brothers, James, Joses, Simon, and Judas, as well as several sisters. However, most biblical scholars reject the idea that Jesus had any brothers. They believe that the word brothers in this passage is actually a mistranslation. They argue that the original language doesn't actually say that Jesus had brothers. Instead, it simply says brothers, which in that culture could mean relatives. In other words, Jesus could have been referring to his cousins when he said this. Now let's look at the other possibility. This Jesus, son of Joseph, was not the Messiah, but rather a random person with the same name. There are a couple of problems with this explanation. First, it's extremely unlikely that 3 different people in 3 different ossuaries would happen to have the same name. After all, this is the equivalent of finding 3 separate lottery tickets with the same numbers. It's also interesting to note that the name Jesus was unpopular among Jews during this time. In fact, the name wasn't very popular until much later. The only time it appeared was in the oldest known copy of the New Testament, known as Papyrus 75, and that document dates back to the 3rd or 4th century AD, about 300 years after Jesus' death. So why would this Jewish family name their son after a foreign deity? Well, the answer is simple. They wouldn't. This was not a Jewish family. Scholars believe that this ossuary and the others found in this cave belonged to a group of early Christians. This would explain why they would name their son after the Jewish Messiah, who converted the world to Christianity. If this is true, then it seems pretty obvious that this Jesus was not the Messiah. After all, if Jesus was crucified, how could he have been buried in an ossuary 2,000 years ago? However, Let's take a step back and think about this. Why would early Christians use ossuaries? The practice of burying the dead in these stone boxes started with the Jews. Early Christians followed Jewish customs in almost everything they did, so it makes perfect sense that they would use ossuaries as well. But what about this inscription? Would early Christians really name an ossuary after the Messiah? The answer is yes. In fact, we have evidence of this. Archaeologists found another ossuary that says Jesus, son of Ananias. Who was Ananias? According to the Bible, Ananias was a member of the Sanhedrin who was involved in the plot to kill Jesus. So again, why would early Christians name an ossuary after the son of a man who hated Jesus? The answer is simple. They named it after his earthly father, not because they thought he was the son of God. Now all this evidence seems to point toward one conclusion. Jesus was not the Messiah, but he may have been a relative of Jesus. Again, the word brother in the Bible may be a mistranslation and could actually mean relative. It's possible that this was Jesus' cousin, not his brother. Is this proof that Jesus existed? Not really. We already had plenty of evidence that he existed before this discovery. It is interesting to see that the name Jesus popped up again, especially since it was spelled exactly the same. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think this was Jesus' secret message to Peter buried for 1,500 years? Or do you think this was just another random coincidence? Let me know your thoughts. Also, please remember to leave a like. Till next time, thanks for watching.